And just, I haven't really looked at charts yet, but my chart just popped open with oil. Uh, and oil went crazy. On a daily, we're at like 113 right now, which is crazy. I'm just gonna go to a smaller chart to kind of see when that happened. Looks like pretty much, I think, last night at 9 p.m. Um, I think that was right when Trump spoke. And so clearly, I don't know what he said, but clearly whatever he said, um, the oil market did not like. And so hitting up I mean, that's a lot of pressure. I would assume downwards pressure on the market. Actually, to bring up the ES, yeah, it looks like this is 9 o'clock. ES on a 15-minute chart. We pretty much sold off right from that. So I would assume the Nasdaq pretty much reacted the same. Looks like we're pretty much just giving this move back up we were kind of looking for yesterday. But the market was, with the news, just waiting for the news. And so that's kind of how this market is right now, right? Is it's just kind of choppy, a little bit of volatility in the day, but big picture was really just waiting for that major news release. So kind of seeing, just looking at where we are for the day, I would say we're still in this downtrend. Um, to me, it looks like yesterday we pretty much just reversed off of it, broke out of it a tiny bit. But again, like downtrend, I like to try and keep them as kind of a zone, just like I do my resistance levels or support levels. And then big old move down here. I would assume maybe a minor level for support would be kind of this previous swing high here. Could even drag it down a little bit. And where the market kind of chopped before it had this big spike that started this move. That's where I would kind of assume that this initial move would start slow down, and it's already kind of started to slow down. And we kind of have a spike and then a potential trend happening too. Basically, the exact same thing like this. It spikes and then it starts to become a little bit more healthy. So no telling kind of where this could go right now. I'll probably redraw these trend lines on a 5 minute here. And then, Nasdaq's pretty much the same. I'm just going to draw that. I have this level from yesterday. Just going to draw it across. Um, there is kind of this minor support level. It doesn't look as good on the Nasdaq. On the ES, it's kind of here. That would be maybe considered if we moved up here. Just watching to see how we reacted to that. But at the moment, it looks like I would assume we continue lower. Now, if oil decides to, just going to look at oil on a 15-minute. If it decides to slow down and reverse some of this and pull back, that could put some upper pressure on the market, which could make the market rally a little. I'm just going to mark the actual all-time high here on oil, because I think knowing that if it's broken and made a new all-time high might be important as things kind of move. So in terms of big picture trends of where the market is, what I'm seeing is, for me, and how I like to do things is, I will say we are kind of in the middle of the range. And so it makes it hard to, like, taking a reversal off of this zone it's not a great, zone. Versus up here, there's a lot of reasons to think, big picture reasons, to think that the trend could reverse. Same thing with kind of the lows down here. So I'm going to be cautious today with where we're at, just because this isn't really a strong support level. It's a spot I'm going to watch and see how this trend develops going into it. But it's definitely not as I'm not as confident in it as a short up at the highs here like we had yesterday. So looking at a a 5 minute, of these. So the S&P 500 on a 5-minute. I do kind of want to draw. It looks like we might be able to draw. There's some kind of, I think this is at least a pretty clean downtrend. Maybe there's this as a trend line, but there's not too much to confirm off of it. I'll just leave it there in case we kind of retest that area. But we do have definitely, like, this is definitely a move that I think it will get given back at some point, looking at fair value gaps. But we got to keep in mind that this initial move has been given up. And so when it essentially gives up, this is like the original unhealthy move. When it kind of gives that back up, it starts to become less likely that it might immediately reverse. We'll probably come down to this level, and any number of things could happen. We could continue lower because in the big picture, I think, we're not at the lows, right? We're not at the main lows. This is kind of a middle of the range level. We're not super overextended. I would say like on a 15-minute chart or, a bigger picture time frame. On a 1-minute, maybe we are, but or a 5-minute, but I think it remains to be seen what happens to this downtrend first. So same thing here. NASDAQ on a 5-minute basically looks the exact same. I'm just going to I think that downtrend really just kind of will be good going forwards to look at on a 1-minute chart. That might continue us lower as we test it. So looking at a 1-minute chart now for the S&P 500 futures. I'm just going to mark market opens 9:30. I'm going to mark my 2 timing windows, 9:45 and 10 o'clock, to see what happens. And then actually, I'm going to bring up the news calendar now just to kind of see the potential of what's going on there. So we had unemployment claims before the market, which can usually cause movement. But that happened literally right here. And that news didn't do anything to the market. I don't think the market cared about that compared to currently what's happening with oil. And so otherwise, honestly, there really isn't that much news going on. Or sorry, that's Friday. I just circled. Today, anytime you see like an FOMC member speaks, that really doesn't do anything. I've never really seen it do anything. It's a yellow one, which helps confirm that. The only time is generally when it's an actual Fed meeting minutes. It'll be red, or if specifically Powell is speaking, who's the Fed chair. He's kind of the big main guy that everyone listens to. So you can see there's another one speaking later. I don't really pay attention to those. Natural gas, that doesn't really affect us either. It doesn't really affect the main S&P 500 futures or major markets. If you were trading natural gas, I'm sure that would be something to pay attention to, but I don't do that. I don't even know if you can trade natural gas. I would assume you can. Not something I've ever actually looked into. So that's kind of mainly what I'm looking for this morning. I think it'll really be interesting to see how the NASDAQ here, if we're just going to continue the overnight sell-off. If the market just thinks that's a big enough thing. I think today I'll actually try and I think trying to watch oil a little bit might be important. Even just on like a 5-minute. I don't think I want to look at a 1-minute to read into it too much. But a 5-minute, I think, just to consistently be like, okay, the trend is just up right now. And that's going to consistently put more likely pressure on the market downwards. That's kind of what I'm going to be looking at. So as we wait for the market, let me know if you guys have any questions. or thoughts? I guess what do you guys think your bias for the day is? What kind of direction from here do you think we're gonna do? Do you think we're gonna go down and continue like on a big move, come up a little bit, or do you think we might just kind of chop around? These were some big moves up and down, and the market might just be like, hey, I'm just gonna sit here for a while, see what happens, and go into the long weekend. We do have a long weekend coming up. I'm just gonna confirm that Friday's off before I keep saying that. But I'm pretty sure I looked and it's closed tomorrow. If not, it's a short day. It says the bond market's closed. NASDAQ is closed. So yeah, market's closed tomorrow. Thursdays have been red for the past 2 months. I feel like a lot of days have been red for the last 2 months. Yeah, more likely, I think, Hasher, you're right. We've been consistently chopping. Don't think that all of a sudden the mode of the market is going to change. This whole week that I've been trading, I didn't trade Monday, but every day has been, a little bit of volatility. Oh, let's not enter in a trade. A little bit of volatility at the open, and then it'll just kind of sit there, and then maybe it moves a little bit. But in big picture, it's definitely been choppy. I definitely won't hold it. I don't swing trade anymore or hold trades over the weekend. I used to do that with options, but I didn't like holding stuff overnight. It's just on your mind, and especially over the weekend, I feel like I couldn't relax and disconnect. So that's one big reason I switched to day trading, is being able to just come in here, trade for a couple hours, and then be done is so nice for just your mental state, I think. I am on NinjaTrader here. Yeah, we could rubber band effect. I think that remains to be seen, but I think the potential's there. This actually I want to see. So the market, I'm just looking here, is down basically 1.5%. I think yesterday we were up to 2.5%. So that's definitely a big move percentage wise. And I think again as well, watching oil here, on a 5-minute chart, oil is definitely overextended. And so this could definitely, I don't think it's gonna, I definitely don't, this is pretty healthy of a move up on oil, but I could definitely see us pulling back here. Of this kind of getting a little frothy and being like, okay, it needs to kind of settle down. I think that's very likely for oil. And so in that case, that could put a little upwards pressure on the market, but big picture reality, that's not that much of a move. We're still way above 100, which I think is a very big psychological level for oil and the market. And above 110 is, I would assume that's crazy. I don't know a huge amount of oil's impact on macroeconomics. Like that's a whole nother beast. But from obviously Iran happening and that just being all over the news and learning about it a little bit more as it unfolds, definitely that seems to be a huge thing of just the impact it has on energy and just, oil runs a lot of the world. So we're pretty much opening here. Just gonna kind of see, as usual, like what happens in the first 5 minutes. We might get an initial spike or chop. Just looking at how big this candlestick is. just to kind of, again, gauge volatility. It's over 10 points. So we still have, massive volatility going on in the market. I think maybe one thing to think about too is how do we react to, I think, the overnight swings. Now, I do like to look at those, especially if we're in a range. And so I think if the market looks like it's going to range, it does have a decent chance to reverse off of these levels. But again, I'll want to see how we push up into these. If we just blast through them or break out and just continue higher, that's not really a spot that I'm going to look for a reversal. I think these definitely will be potential spots to look for as the most recent areas where the market has reversed. But again, understanding that the big picture could come into play and break those. Oil is selling off a tiny bit, which could be helping with this upwards movement here. NASDAQ is pretty much doing the same. I think I'll mark these levels on the NASDAQ too. So I think if we kind of came up here, I'd look for potential short up here, but also I think, a long down here. Just got to wait and see the opening volatility of the market, what it's going to do. That's not what I want to write. And going into today, I think the big thing is keeping in mind that the market has been choppy, and I haven't taken a trade yet this week. And I don't know about you guys, but as I don't take a trade necessarily, FOMO starts to creep in more and more. It starts to, you start to think, oh, I want to take a trade, because I haven't got one in a while. I'm actually going to delete this downtrend line because clearly we've broken that. Same on the NASDAQ. We might come down here and bounce. That might be something to think about. But, even though every trade, the outcome is separate, like mathematical wise and everything, and the market can play out differently. But you got to remember, like, your emotions continue. And so, like, your emotions of, oh, taking a loss, that impacts your next trade if you can't reset. Or if you haven't taken a trade in a little while, you start to get more FOMO and impatience because, we all want to take trades. We all want to, we don't want to just sit here and not take trades. But that's, the nature of the market right now is that it's very, very news driven. That I only trade the market opens because that's what works for me, and the the volatility, looking at the big picture, has been after hours. We had a big move up yesterday, day before, and then last night, the market waited for Trump's speech and sold off as soon as that happened. And then the same thing, with oil prices. Oil shot up overnight, and now it looks like it might settle, and I think it's going to kind of go sideways a little bit. But, that makes it so if that's a huge move and the market might need to just sit here and, that all happens overnight. And so traders come in, big hedge funds and banks come in, and they're kind of just, it's almost like, it's like a standoff. Nobody knows what to do exactly because a lot of people are potentially getting caught on the wrong side with bigger trades that they can't, we can get in and out of a trade very quickly, but like big hedge funds and stuff can't because they're moving so much money. And so they have to kind of sometimes just wait things out, and the market might just open and chop for a while before it figures what it wants to do out with the day. The first candlestick strategy, I'm kind of assuming you're talking about what seems like it's all over YouTube right now, is like the first 5 or 15-minute candle. And you like look at, like if I pull up a 5-minute chart, it's like, okay, here's the first candle of the 5-minute chart, and you draw the highs and the lows, and you take a trade based on what happens after that, or a 15-minute candle. I don't really do that. I just kind of stick to what works for me, and I definitely trade very similar, but I almost trade the opposite. I think that strategy looks a lot of the time for a breakout, and I actually look for almost a reversal instead, because I see a lot of the time that the market spikes in one direction and then reverses, and so you could technically trade both at the same time, probably, because a lot of the times the market, if it's going to move that day, it will come down to like a reversal level here and it will reverse and I'll get a trade, or it'll come down here, chop for a while. I'll probably skip the trade because it doesn't look good, and then it will break out. And so that would be a very like way to maximize your time in the morning of being able to get both sides. Now, I will say I have tried that a little, in the sense of trying to think of, okay, well, if I'm not going to take the reversal, why don't I look for the continuation or breakout? And what's interesting about that is it almost added complexity that affected even just taking like a reversal. There would be spots where if the reversal just didn't look good and it was choppy, well, I started to think, oh, well, that means I should be in a long or a breakout, sorry. And from there, it actually ended up, it would just chop and I'd still take a loss. And it basically added more variables to think about and overcomplicated things for me. Now, maybe I'm sure a better trader could do it, but that's just not me, right? Simple has worked way better for me, of just being able to really laser focused on just, kind of what I have up in the corner up here, my checklist of, okay, it comes down, right here, we've kind of got a downtrend working. And if it comes down to this reversal zone I've got here. And that downtrend clearly has kind of broken. A lot of times I'll use a trend line, or you can, be looking at kind of the swings. And if it makes a head and shoulders pattern, like the structure changes to where it starts to make higher highs and higher lows versus lower lows and lower highs, that for me works a lot better. And if it doesn't set up that and it looks like it's going to continue lower, it's easier for me to stay out of a trade versus trying to take a trade. So interesting enough, just looking at oil here real quick, we did kind of pull back and we're pushing higher a little bit. Now, that doesn't mean we haven't necessarily made a new high, but it's definitely not making a fast reversal here. It's showing a little bit more strength. Now, it could still fail, but just keeping that in mind of, it seems like as long as oil is going up, this is going to go, the ES or NASDAQ is going to go down. So definitely keeping an eye on that, I think, today, just because it's such a correlated move. Now, both could just, if oil just starts to kind of chop here in a range, that means the market's just going to chop too. I think that's probably more likely. Now, the hope is we get down here enough to take a trade off of this zone to, kind of capture a move to the upside. Again, just assuming that, hey, it's just going to stay in this range and I can capture, a little trade here. And that being said, if that happens, entering in a trade here, I don't think I would be going for 3x. I would probably just shoot for 2x, just with the idea that the market's very tight. And it's unlikely to, I like to have a varied management style. And if I think it's going to just skyrocket and I can capture that whole move, I will let things play out a little bit more and give it a looser trailing stop. But recently that hasn't worked well. The market's just so volatile and back and forth that I think going for smaller targets is actually more profitable right now. And so that's the hard part about the market, is you always got to be slightly adjusting things, even if you're trading the same strategy. And it sometimes takes a while to realize that. Like I had, 2 trades recently that went break even though they went up. I was up, 2x on them. And I let them come all the way back on me on break even, and it sucks. But after those 2 trades, I started to realize, okay, I need to shift something. I need to change what I'm doing slightly, because, it's clearly the market's not working for that kind of management style. Someone asked a question why your S&P 500 is a different price than mine. If you are, it could depend on if you are actually looking at the actual ES futures, and then if you're actually looking at the micro version or the mini version like I am. So there's, if you're actually looking at the MES, that could be slightly different. Or if you're actually looking at an index or, the SPY, well, that clearly is different. But it could also be delay. Theoretically, there should be just a couple seconds of stream delay, but it also depends on your specific internet connection too. Interesting. The NASDAQ is actually down at the lows here. So it'll be interesting to see how it kind of reacts to that. Definitely kind of watching that a little. And the ES could just come down to this. I mean, this is a super micro level. We are 15 minutes after the open, which is kind of my initial timing of looking for a reversal. Now, frankly, I think we're kind of, I'm just going to remove this downtrend line. It's not really pertinent anymore. I think we're kind of in this downtrend. It's just a sloppy, volatile one at the moment. and seeing just how we if it wants to break out here. Gonna move this over here, seeing as there's no price movement on that side of the chart. So we could actually be looking at a bounce here. Oil looks like it might be trying to top out. I honestly think this is just too choppy. I don't think I'll enter in here. You know, maybe it could be we set up a little double bottom here. But the risk reward ratio isn't that great. And I think, you know, just with how the market is, being on the cautious side is the smart play. As much as I would love to take a trade. And I think probably the better play is if we actually spike up here, get kind of people excited to that the market might reverse. And maybe if oil spikes down here a little bit and then continues, we could get, you know, some kind of reversal off of here. Like I want to, my honestly biggest thing about what I like to see is a fast-paced move that happens because it's, you know, that's what I consider an unhealthy move. And so I want to see that come up here and then potentially look to fail. And it did bounce off this area. But again, for me, that wasn't really tradable. It broke this downtrend and then just shot up. And jumping in here would have been way too much of a gamble. You know, I approach trading of taking just a few trades, and especially at the trading size I am now, I don't need that many to make a lot of money, and so that's what works for me. I think the question is to see, do we just kind of come up to the high here and then reverse? You asked about a tutorial on the platform. I do have a tutorial on NinjaTrader. If you go to my YouTube channel on, you know, just clicking home and scroll down, there's a playlist that has a NinjaTrader setup tutorial, and that'll walk you through everything. It'll be way more effective than me doing it live. You know, this is a lot more for watching what the market's doing and trying to find a trade or waiting for one versus if you're new to my strategy, go to my channel. I have a ton of really good polished tutorials that'll kind of walk you through everything in a very linear, well-explained fashion. Looking at oil again here, just on a 1 minute to see what's kind of going on. It's just kind of in this upper range. Again, I think it could break and give this full move back up if it does. And then it might find a little bit more chop here. And if it moves down here, you know, just to like compare it very, you know, it went up. This is where, right here, actually, is where the market opened. It pretty much went up and down, and the market opened and went down and up. And so these are definitely very, very correlated right now, which isn't the norm a lot of times. So it's, you know, I don't really usually look at oil this aggressively or under such a microscope, but with how, you know, the market's acting right now and with what's going on in the Middle East with oil, that's kind of just running at the show. And so my thought for a trade this morning is that I don't think oil is going to give this whole move back up. I think it just got a little overexcited here and it's going to pull back in a healthy manner, come somewhere down to here and potentially bounce. And I think that's going to line up with the highs here and we can look for potential short. Now, if that scenario doesn't play out, then I just won't take a trade. You know, it's about having a plan of what you're looking for versus trying to be reactionary to the market. And that's kind of being reactionary, but it's being reactionary, I think, in a methodical way, which is what you need to do when it comes to trading consistently. NASDAQ is still struggling a little bit here. It's got a lot more room to the highs, but I think also it's been selling off more. I think tech's been kind of struggling a little bit more in this environment. So someone says they're trying to trade the minis with $100 in your account. It totally depends on the platform you're using for how much intraday margin is required. But also you need to be trading. Actually, you are trading the minis. So if I switch to the minis right now, actually, I'm not going to do it since this is kind of getting moving. But the market's so big right now. As a someone starting out with an account, it's going to be really hard to get smaller risk because the market is so volatile right now. You know, this candlestick that is literally just producing is like 10 points, and that's not normal. You know, you can have $20 or $30 of risk with a normal market, but like right now, you know, risking that much is going to be a lot harder in this market. So oil's kind of still coming down here. I have moved to looking at a 1 minute chart of it just because I think it's so correlated today. And I think it is going to be a helpful confirmation for potentially taking a long here. The market is punching up pretty good here too. Now that doesn't mean it's gonna, I want to look for a short up here. But what I need to see is some kind of either head and shoulders or some kind of structural change. NASDAQ looks like it's actually caught up and it's pretty much at the high as well. You know, sorry guys if I don't get all your questions. I am trying to I'll look over whenever things are kind of a little slower, but I think right now because the market's moving, I probably won't be looking at them for the next 5 or 10 minutes just because this definitely has the potential to set something up. If we look at a 5 minute, just to like kind of look at the fair value gap indicator, we've got one showing up right here and one showing up right here. And I use that as an easy gauge for an unhealthy move. Essentially what it does is it just draws these boxes whenever a candlestick goes one direction without anything between it. And so, zooming into a 1 minute chart, you can see the market just kind of shot up here. And as an unhealthy move goes, that's a great way to easily confirm it if you're kind of new to looking at those. But also just looking at this, you can see that it's kind of getting going really fast. And so the question is, does it come up here and chop for a little while and keep going higher? Or do we come up here and slow down and reverse? Or the third option, which has what's been happening recently, is we come up here and just start to fake everyone out and just sit here for a while, and then maybe an hour later reverse. And so I definitely I'm going to be on the more cautious side because that's what's been happening more often. And so this is a market where you don't want to be aggressive with entries, at least looking for reversals after a big move, because it's been very choppy. I got my little risk reward tool ready to kind of see, I'll put my stop somewhere. Essentially my goal would be is if we made some kind of pullback like this and made a lower high, I would put my stop above this high, and then I would enter in essentially the break of this low. And then on this tool, I basically roughly try and target around $1,500. It's got a little wiggle room. And then we would look to give this move back up. I don't know if I necessarily try and target the lows. I think the initial thing would be, okay, how do we react actually to this high that the market opened with? And then, if we break that, I think it opens the door. But right now we're still punching higher. NASDAQ is actually hasn't broken the highs, which is good. But ES this could totally be a head and shoulder setting up. Again, though, I'm looking at oil here as the trend setter in a way. I'd almost want to see a confirmation that oil is almost setting up a head and shoulders in the opposite direction. I'm not going to take a trade on oil, but using that as seeing it starting to reverse, because these markets are so correlated right now. If this goes up, the S&P 500 is going to go down. And so using that, I think will be really strong right now. But we could also just skyrocket here. Big picture, we had a big unhealthy move here. And the market might want to just give that back up. And this trade was kind of the reversal of the morning that happened at you can pretty much see it pretty much bottomed at that 9:45 timing. I didn't jump in because it just didn't really set up exactly how I'd like. But you can see how consistent those timings can be sometimes. And this could be a signal, actually, that the market is starting to get out of its choppy state in the mornings, which is a good signal for the future. Now, you might not, I didn't catch this move, but seeing it might start to adjust what I do in the future. Again, it's about adjusting to what the market's doing. You're not necessarily going to catch the first move. But the next time this happens, I might jump in with the idea that, hey, the market is being less choppy and more directional. And it's higher chance to jump into swings. Now we're at the 10 a.m. timing now. I will say most of the time, the first reversal of the day is the higher probability one. It's harder. I find myself less profitable with taking essentially what I would call the second reversal. So if this comes down and kind of sets up, I'll still probably take it just because the market is back and forth. And depending on how oil looks too. But that's something to keep in mind. You know, this might have been the trade of the day. And, you know, that's okay. Oil does look like it's potentially setting up a bottom here. That's a nice, it's definitely like chopping, and it did kind of a failed breakout here. Big bullish candlestick. So if this starts to push higher, definitely watching how the market reacts here. And if you want to see this kind of pull back in a good way, that shows kind of that it got overextended. Ideally, we come down here and essentially test this level and then pull back, and I enter in on the break of this level. That would be the ideal setup, because we kind of did a little bottom here, which shows that the market did kind of respect this zone a little. And so you can consider this the left shoulder, even though it's pretty small, but the market's moving quickly. NASDAQ looks pretty much the exact same. And I'm still kind of watching oil. I'll just bring it over here on the left side. That didn't work. So that's kind of what I'm waiting for here. Again, the big question is, do we pull back and actually continue higher? Or do we pull back and attempt to continue higher and then fail and reverse and continue to the downside? I don't usually look at oil this consistently, but with just how the news is right now, they're very correlated. And just looking at the chart this morning, they're very correlated. You know, if oil is going up, the market's going down, and if oil is going down, the market's going up. Now that could slow and change by tomorrow or the next trading day, but just with how big the move in oil was overnight, it's clearly moving the market. Oil does look like it's starting to bottom here, and so that's good for a short. Where'd my chart go? But again, being patient and just wait for the signal. I'm not going to jump in yet because the signal's not there. It could go either direction still. That was a strong move up, and there could be a reason for that. But oil is kind of in the area that I am looking for it to find some potential support. And so If this just sells off here, that's a bummer. It's a big bummer. But with how the market is, I'm not in the mode to take aggressive entries. So this has, I would say this is testing this area now. And so if we pull back and put, I think punching a couple candlesticks up here and then seeing them it start to reverse, that would be ideal as a pretty much a lower high. And I'd want to see NASDAQ pretty much look the same. It's pretty much looking the same. And then of course oil as well. Oil is pretty much printing the exact same, but just opposite, you know. This candlestick's down, this candlestick's up. And so if this looks like it's going to make a higher low and continue higher, this is going to likely make a lower high and continue lower. Wow, big move up. NASDAQ actually made a new high. ES is likely going to. Oil actually didn't make a new low, so that's kind of interesting. Now again, this could turn into the head and shoulders that I take a trade off of. This trade is definitely not over yet in terms of potential. That's definitely an excited move right here, this candlestick. If it's going to signal the end of the trend, but it could also be signaling that there's going to be just continuation for the day. So still just being patient, following kind of my checklist. Definitely this uptrend is broken now. So if we kind of go through this checklist, we're at kind of a reversal zone. I would say we have done a breakout, but I'm looking for a failed breakout at this point. This trend's broken. The reversal pattern I want to look for is a head and shoulders. So I'm waiting for essentially this to form. And then ideally we get kind of a bullish candlestick, or sorry, bearish candlestick that signals the breakout here. And then I'll get in short and look for us to continue lower. Markets are not open tomorrow. Yeah, I think you're right. If we, like, where do you guys think we go from here? Do you think we just give this whole move back up? It's possible. Day after is possible for a huge move like this. It's very infrequent though. But it's totally possible. We've had a couple of those over the last couple months where it has just done, like a few months ago, I think at this point, if I try and find it, I can't even, my chart doesn't even go that far back. But, you know, we had spikes like this that were just getting reversed the day after. Still looking for a short up here. We have the potential to have this fail. Oil is, I'm still watching oil to see, it's made a new low here. But the question is, you know, does that continue lower? It does, you know, it has had a huge move. But I think we're kind of at a minor support where that it could, I think if it's going to continue its uptrend, or at least not give the uptrend back, it's going to most likely bounce in this area. And that doesn't mean it bounces and just continues to skyrocket. It might just bounce here and chop, or bounce here and chop. I think it's definitely probably going to slow down for a little while, just because kind of the news has hit. But it that could change any second, right? Any news, the market is so sensitive to news right now that it could just, some other news could come up and we could be moving another 100 or 10 points or $10 in oil. I think roughly 118 is actually the all-time high on oil. Not all-time high, but the recent all-time high. So we're definitely a little ways from that. We could be, which has happened a lot recently too. We're starting to set up what I call a spike and then trend. Oil's doing the exact same thing, where you have a spike of a move start and then it slows down, but it still continues in that direction. This is something the market's been doing a lot recently. So it gets all excited and then kind of just sluggishly continues higher. And I'm not gonna take a breakout trade here. I think at this point you're kind of chasing, at least on a 1-minute chart. If you're trading a big picture time frame or doing a different strategy, it could be totally something else. But for me, I mainly just look for reversals anyway. But to me, this would be chasing a move. You're getting in over most likely FOMO of seeing this breakout. And especially with how the market's been acting when it breaks out, it's very likely we go into chop here and sit here for 20 or 30 minutes before it decides to go some direction. So while we just kind of wait for this to kind of do its thing, let me know your guys' questions and I'll see what I can answer. We're kind of just seeing how this develops right now over the next few minutes, because I think it could go. We're definitely at a kind of inflection point of like, okay, what's the trend going to be for the next hour? Are we going to reverse this move up, or are we going to kind of just sit here? I don't trade prop firms. I trade my own money. Big thing I think for beginners is prop firm fees are a lot. In the beginning, I think every beginner loses a lot. You're just learning. That's how trading is. You're gonna make a lot of mistakes, and it's demo trading and doing prop firms. Essentially, demo trading with low risk is the way to go. But the thing about prop trading is blowing accounts and all the fees that they do is really expensive. I think they're really set up to, in a way, dangle a piece of cheese like in front of a mouse. You think you're gonna unlock an account and be able to trade and make a ton of money. But the percentage of people that pass is the same percentage of people that are consistently profitable at trading. And so as a beginner, extremely unlikely that you do that. And you end up just spending hundreds of dollars to essentially just demo trade, when you could just be using like something like NinjaTrader that I use, and you can demo trade as long as you want, and all you have to really do is pay data fees, which you have to do on any trading account. And just to get access to the ES and a couple of the markets is like $4 a month, and so it's super low cost. I'm planning to continue. My next live stream will be next Tuesday. I won't be trading Monday, just kind of taking a long weekend. If you want my platform to check it out, just put a link in the chat or the description. Oil is kind of still just, it kind of broke out of this maybe, but like not really enough data to have a crazy trend line drawn. Still could be just in this. I mean, my read at this point is we're just copying the same thing that we've been doing. If we look at yesterday, spike, move up. Yesterday, like this is why I was more cautious today. Today, in hindsight, looking at this in hindsight, I should have taken this, right? Easy trade, easy money. It bottomed here at the, this little micro double bottom, did a nice little double bottom. NASDAQ bottomed at the lows, had a clean double bottom. But if you look at what we've been doing, yesterday had a, let's see, the market opened up here, sorry. Had a spike, crazy spike, and then just went into an insane chop fest. This was probably because it was waiting for the Trump news that happened. But same thing the day before is we spiked up and just sat there and chopped. And then eventually we did. I'm kind of looking, I'm staying a little bit looking for this. We could just sit up here and chop and then kind of give it back up. And so that's what I'm trying to look for today. I'm being a little patient with it, with the idea that there is that potential. Now, NASDAQ is actually, if I look at a 5-minute, we're actually getting near this previous low. So that's kind of showing up on a 1-minute chart up here. But again, it's just not the market conditions to be forcing something. And that's what sucks about trading sometimes, is having to just sit on your hands and knees. And I hope me struggling to just sit here and not do anything helps you guys do that too, because I definitely know from experience, the patience and discipline side is way harder than taking trades. How much money would I consider as my risk factor if it's your very first trade? I don't know exactly what you mean, but I would say if you're starting to risk real money, I would be trying to trade as little money as possible, because going from demo trading to real money is going to increase the intensity. Demo trading, a lot of people can become consistently profitable easy because there's no emotions tied to it. But as soon as you put real money on the line, emotions come into play and affect your judgment. You get scared to jump in a trade and you skip it, or you FOMO into a trade. Like, maybe you FOMO'd in on a short here thinking that it was going to go down. And then, the market, instead of, the market made you loss, and, the signal was there to not take a trade yet. So that's a huge part about trading. And, as you increase in size, that's going to increase the intensity. And so, I didn't start out risking $1,500, $1,600 a trade. I started out risking like $50, and you slowly build because you get desensitized to the dollar amount over time. And so that's how, you see people trading crazy amounts of money, because they have spent years slowly getting there. I think I'm probably going to give this just a couple more minutes, like 5-10 minutes. I really want to see us, I think, to trade here, it needs to kind of break here in a good way. Like this could be, you could, not that I really use this pattern, but to say it as a pattern, is we've kind of punched up here and made a chop range. I think if we punch back down and then pull back and then break, I think that's potential for a reversal. Because we've had this huge momentum and then started to kind of slow, that gives the potential for it to just give it up, if that momentum and strength isn't there. But again, NASDAQ is actually kind of just acting pretty bullish here. So Oil is still kind of, since it's so correlated, that's what I've been watching as well. Oil is just kind of in a range here too. I haven't taken a trade yet today. I haven't taken a trade all week, actually. This week's been tricky. It's been a lot of hurry up and wait, or it looks like it's gonna get some volatility going, and then it just kind of sits there. And I've honestly, because it's my first week live trading, I've been trying to keep it a little tame. Get used to it. It's exactly like sizing up. If you size up money, it increases the intensity. Live streaming in front of people, knowing that I'm going to be scrutinized for whatever I do, adds intensity. And so just like anything in trading, like that intensity will go away over time, and I'll get used to it and get more comfortable and be able to do exactly what I want to do. But to be honest, I wouldn't have traded any other way this week. And so I'm perfectly happy with how I traded this week. Market just is tricky right now. And old me would have lost money this week, 100%. Versus, me now, sure, I'm not making money, but I'm not losing money. And that's half the game, is reducing your losses. That's usually, for me, what pushed the P&L higher consistently. How much I make a month really depends, on the month, right? Like, granted, the month's just started last month. I was gone for like half of last month, but I think I literally took 3 trades. 2 of them were break even, and I think 1 turned into a loss. And so technically last month I lost money. But again, it's, month before I made money. I think I made, like maybe 8K. And so it's something over time. And also, frankly, this year, I just sized up. And so it's been getting used to that sizing. That, especially for me at trading slower amounts, it takes longer to build that confidence at a new size. And so it almost takes me a month or 2 to like get settled with the new size and get really comfortable, and to be able to execute my strategy properly. So how to decide when to increase your dollar size? One is, I think, showing consistent profits at that size is actually making money. But 2, being mentally ready. You don't want to size up. If you size up and then go on a win streak, do not size up again. You need to be able to handle a downswing on your size. That's where really you'd get tested, if you can handle that size, because losing multiple trades in a row at that size, that'll hurt, and you got to be able to handle that. And so, that's, I think, the biggest thing. And then also mentally over time, you'll start to get, desensitized to the sizing. It won't feel, initially sizing up, it'll feel intense. And then over time, you'll notice that, okay, I actually don't, like for me, I don't worry about, like, $1,400 of risk feels kind of small for me right now. If a trade looks good and my stop is, I'm going to enter in here and here, I almost want to increase my size, because I think, I don't want this trade to work out and 3x be only 4,000. And so, I like to be at the upper end of where my risk reward tool kind of allows me to, based on its settings. But even here, like, this feels like a good size I'm happy with. And so to me, frankly, my confidence is almost to the point where I want to size up again, but I'm not going to do that, because right now my size up essentially is starting to live stream consistently. And so I want to get used to live streaming. I want to get a couple, a good month or 2 under my belt live streaming, and then I think I'll size up again. And so, you want to be very methodical about it. Like that's everything in trading, is being very methodical about things. NASDAQ looks like it's kind of broken this. It's actually come up to this other reversal zone we're looking at. Someone asked about reversal zones. I essentially draw them off of major swings in the market. Essentially where the market has touched multiple times, or these ones are off of because they were the most recent pre-market levels. A lot of the times, the most recent pre-market high and low will also be respected in some way. Now, we blasted through it today, but we could have totally set up something different and sold off on that. So ES is kind of getting to move in here too. I think at this point, it's probably we're just going to do some kind of slow grind higher over the day. I think we're still just in this uptrend, you know? It's choppy. It's going to be very easy to FOMO into something, I think, right now. That's why it's like I don't like to read into every little candlestick, because it's so easy to, you know, if I kind of pull the chart back here, see this candlestick and say, oh my God, that's a huge fake out, big, you know, what do you call it? A hammer candlestick. You know, that's a big reversal sign on a one candlestick pattern level. But, you know, the overall trend didn't care about that at all. You know, that's why I look at big picture the most first. Farron, I appreciate that. I totally trying to find a happy medium of trying to, because I do this because I want to help educate people and help, you know, I want to help you guys. But yeah, definitely trying to find that happy middle ground of reading chat and not letting it affect my trading, because trolls will be trolls. And, you know, reading something negative, even if it's, you know, someone just trolling around, it's, you know, I definitely don't want that to affect my trading. Things are just still just sitting here. Oh, I was gonna pull up oil and it's just on my screen right here. Oil's still just in the same thing too, you know. Oil is perfectly mimicking what the market's doing. Um, you know, the market opened up here, sold off, and ripped higher. Now it's kind of chopping. Oil, pretty much opened here. Technically, the oil market was already open, but when the S&P 500 opened, it pretty much went up and then did this. And that's just because of the news. I don't normally look at it that closely all the time. But if oil is just gonna sit here and chop, which frankly was what I was assuming was gonna happen, um, I think for NinjaTrader, to open an account initially, if you're just gonna demo trade, I don't actually think you have to put any money in. It's been a long time since I opened my own NinjaTrader account, but I think you can just demo trade. But I think the minimum might be $50 or $100. Someone else might be able to correct me on that. We're kind of starting to reverse here. Definitely there is potential for some kind of sell-off here. But to be honest, based on my rules, I have hit my trading window. I'm not going to trade past 10:30. When I do, I start to feel FOMO in a situation like this. Like I'm essentially waiting for a trade and trying to take a trade versus, being like, okay, it's setting up at my 10 o'clock reversal timing or this reversal right here at the 9:45 timing. At this point, I'm kind of past my window. So I'm going to call it for the day. I appreciate all of you being here. I am streaming again next week. I will be streaming Tuesday and pretty much the rest of the week after that. My plan is to consistently start doing this. So I hope to see you guys there. Have a good long weekend. Reminder, the market is closed tomorrow. And that's about it. Can't get a trade every day. That's a part of actual trading. This is the reality. It's not always exciting. So have a good weekend, everyone.